The encrypted transmission crackled through the static at 3:47 hours Pacific Standard Time. Command centers across 3 continents went dark. In the depths of Cheyenne Mountain, screens flickered and died. The voice that emerged from the chaos was calm, measured, and belonged to someone who wasn't supposed to be there. Thunder Base, this is Nighthawk 77. Package delivered. RTB in 30 mics. The radio operator's hand froze over his console. Nighthawk 77 had been grounded for 6 months. The pilot behind that call sign had been stripped of combat authorization after what the brass called insubordination and what her squadron called doing the right thing. Yet here she was, reporting a successful strike on a target that officially didn't exist. Major Evangeline Vex Cortez had always been a problem the Air Force couldn't solve. Top of her class at the academy, record-breaking scores in every simulation, but cursed with an inability to stay silent when orders made no sense. 3 years earlier, she'd refused to engage civilian targets in a classified operation over the South China Sea. The inquiry that followed painted her as unreliable, emotionally compromised, unfit for frontline duty. They'd reassigned her to transport runs, cargo hauling, babysitting supply convoys between bases that time forgot. For a pilot who dreamed of pushing the envelope in an F-22 Raptor, flying lumbering C-130s felt like prison with wings. But tonight, as emergency klaxons wailed across Edwards Air Force Base, Vex's grounding had become irrelevant. A rogue nation's nuclear facility had accelerated its timeline. Satellite imagery showed uranium enrichment happening faster than intelligence had predicted. Every combat-ready pilot was either deployed overseas or down for maintenance cycles. The mission window was closing in hours, not days. That's when Colonel Marcus Ripper Henderson made the call that would define both their careers. He found Vex in the mess hall, picking at lukewarm eggs and watching the news coverage of rising tensions. Her dark eyes held the particular sadness of someone whose talents were being wasted while the world burned. "Cortez," he said, sliding into the booth across from her, "how's your night vision?" She looked up, fork suspended midway to her mouth. "Sir." "Your night vision, scale of 1 to 10. 10, sir, always has been." Henderson nodded slowly. Outside, the California desert stretched endlessly under a star-drunk sky. "Good, because I need someone who can fly a single-engine aircraft 700 miles through enemy airspace without getting detected. Off the books. Completely deniable." Vex set down her fork. "Sir, I'm grounded." "Not tonight, you're not." The encrypted transmission crackled through the static at 3:47 hours Pacific Standard Time. Command centers across 3 continents went dark. In the depths of Cheyenne Mountain, screens flickered and died. The voice that emerged from the chaos was calm, measured, and belonged to someone who wasn't supposed to be there. Thunder Base, this is Nighthawk 77. Package delivered. RTB in 30 mics. The radio operator's hand froze over his console. Nighthawk 77 had been grounded for 6 months. The pilot behind that call sign had been stripped of combat authorization after what the brass called insubordination and what her squadron called doing the right thing. Yet here she was, reporting a successful strike on a target that officially didn't exist. Major Evangeline Vex Cortez had always been a problem the Air Force couldn't solve. Top of her class at the academy, record-breaking scores in every simulation, but cursed with an inability to stay silent when orders made no sense. 3 years earlier, she'd refused to engage civilian targets in a classified operation over the South China Sea. The inquiry that followed painted her as unreliable, emotionally compromised, unfit for frontline duty. They'd reassigned her to transport runs, cargo hauling, babysitting supply convoys between bases that time forgot. For a pilot who dreamed of pushing the envelope in an F-22 Raptor, flying lumbering C-130s felt like prison with wings. But tonight, as emergency klaxons wailed across Edwards Air Force Base, Vex's grounding had become irrelevant. A rogue nation's nuclear facility had accelerated its timeline. Satellite imagery showed uranium enrichment happening faster than intelligence had predicted. Every combat-ready pilot was either deployed overseas or down for maintenance cycles. The mission window was closing in hours, not days. That's when Colonel Marcus Ripper Henderson made the call that would define both their careers. He found Vex in the mess hall, picking at lukewarm eggs and watching the news coverage of rising tensions. Her dark eyes held the particular sadness of someone whose talents were being wasted while the world burned. "Cortez," he said, sliding into the booth across from her, "how's your night vision?" She looked up, fork suspended midway to her mouth. "Sir." "Your night vision, scale of 1 to 10. 10, sir, always has been." Henderson nodded slowly. Outside, the California desert stretched endlessly under a star-drunk sky. "Good, because I need someone who can fly a single-engine aircraft 700 miles through enemy airspace without getting detected. Off the books. Completely deniable." Vex set down her fork. "Sir, I'm grounded." "Not tonight, you're not." Henderson's weathered hand spread a classified folder across the sticky table. Satellite photos showed concrete structures emerging from jungle canopy like malignant tumors. The images were timestamped 3 hours ago. In the corner of each photo, radiation symbols glowed ominous red. "The Koreans aren't waiting for permission anymore," Henderson said quietly. "Our assets in-country went dark yesterday. Signal intelligence suggests they're planning to test their first deliverable warhead within 72 hours. Vex studied the photos. Her training kicked in automatically, identifying potential approach vectors, calculating fuel requirements, assessing threat levels. What about the Raptors, the Strike Eagles? All committed to the Taiwan Strait. This came out of nowhere, Cortez. We've got maybe 6 hours before their air defenses come online permanently." Henderson's voice carried the weight of impossible decisions. "I need someone who can slip through their radar net in something small and fast, someone they won't see coming. And if I'm caught?" "You were never here, I never spoke to you. This conversation never happened." Vex looked out the window at the flight line. In the distance, F-22s sat under floodlights like sleeping predators. Her fingers traced the edge of her coffee cup. "What kind of aircraft?" "Modified F-16D stealth coating, reduced radar cross-section, extended range tanks. It's a one-off prototype. Officially, it doesn't exist." "Weapons package?" "Single GBU-28 bunker buster, enough to collapse their entire facility." The mess hall had grown quiet around them. Other late-night shift workers seemed to sense the gravity of their hushed conversation. Vex's eyes met Henderson's. In them, she saw desperation masked as confidence. "Why me, sir, really?" Henderson was quiet for a long moment. "Because you're the only pilot I know who'd rather be court-martialed than follow an order that gets innocent people killed. And tonight, I need someone with that kind of moral courage." "Sir, with respect, that same moral courage got me grounded." "I know, but sometimes the system gets it wrong." Henderson closed the folder. "Sometimes the person everyone says is unreliable is exactly who you need when everything else fails." Vex stood slowly. Through the window, she could see maintenance crews working under floodlights, their movements precise and urgent. "Where's the aircraft?" "Hangar 7, pre-flight's already complete." "And my flight plan?" "There isn't one. You'll be navigating by dead reckoning and GPS. No radio contact once you cross the DMZ." Vex nodded. "Time to target." 4 hours, 17 minutes. She walked toward the door, then paused. "Sir, when this is over, assuming I make it back, what happens to me?" Henderson's smile was grim. "Officially, you were never gone. Unofficially, we'll see." The California desert air hit her face like a promise. Above, stars wheeled in their ancient patterns, indifferent to human ambition. Somewhere in the darkness, a modified F-16 waited. Somewhere across the Pacific, a nuclear facility hummed with deadly purpose. And somewhere between those 2 points, Major Evangeline Cortez would either prove her worth or disappear entirely. She began walking toward Hangar 7, her boots echoing against concrete. Behind her, Henderson watched until she vanished into the shadows. Then he picked up his secure phone and dialed a number that would connect him to the Pentagon's deepest black operations center. "This is Henderson. Nighthawk 77 is go for launch. ETA to target 0400 hours." Hangar 7 squatted against the desert landscape like a classified secret given physical form. No windows, no markings, just battleship gray metal that seemed to absorb light rather than reflect it. Vex's ID card beeped against the reader, and hydraulic doors whispered open with the sound of compressed air and hidden machinery. Inside, the F-16D waited under clinical white lights, but this wasn't the Fighting Falcon she'd trained on a decade ago. The aircraft's skin seemed to shimmer with an almost liquid quality, as if someone had painted it with liquid mercury. Radar-absorbent material covered every surface, giving the plane an otherworldly appearance. "Beautiful, isn't she?" Vex turned to find Master Sergeant Torres approaching with a tablet clutched in oil-stained hands. The veteran crew chief had been working fighters since before Vex was born, his weathered face a map of deployments and late-night maintenance cycles. "She's different," Vex said, running her hand along the wing's leading edge. The coating felt warm, almost alive. $20 million of experimental technology, Torres replied. Radar cross-section smaller than a sparrow. Top speed classified, but let's just say you'll be breaking some laws of physics tonight. Vex walked around the aircraft, her trained eye cataloging modifications. Extended fuel tanks gave the plane's silhouette a sleeker appearance. The single GBU-28 bunker buster hung beneath the fuselage like a metallic egg of destruction. Range: 1,500 miles combat radius, more than enough to reach your target and return. Torres handed her the tablet. "Pre-flight checklist is complete, all systems green. She's ready when you are." Vex scrolled through the technical specifications. The aircraft's call sign was stenciled in subdued letters near the cockpit, Nighthawk 77. Below it, someone had painted a small cartoon vixen with knowing eyes and a sly smile. Her unofficial squadron mascot from her F-22 days. "Who authorized the nose art?" she asked. Torres grinned. "What nose art? I don't see any nose art." The crew chief helped her into the ejection seat, his movements efficient and practiced. "Listen, Major, I've been working on fighters since you were in diapers. I've seen pilots come and go, heroes and screw-ups, aces and washouts, but I've never seen anyone fly like you do." "Torres, let me finish. What happened in the South China Sea wasn't insubordination, it was courage, and tonight you're going to need every bit of that courage." Vex settled into the cockpit as Torres ran through the final checks. The familiar weight of the helmet, the gentle hum of electronics coming online, the soft glow of multifunction displays painting her face in ethereal blue light. This was her element, her natural habitat. In the cockpit, she was exactly who she was meant to be. "Radio check," Torres said through the intercom. "Nighthawk 77, loud and clear." "Good, now listen carefully. Your navigation waypoints are pre-programmed. Follow them exactly. Once you cross the DMZ, you're on your own. No radio contact, no GPS updates, no support. Just you and 700 miles of hostile airspace." "Copy that." Torres stepped back from the aircraft. "Major, bring her home." "Roger that, Sergeant." The F-16's engine spooled up with a whisper that built to a controlled roar. Vex felt the familiar surge of adrenaline as the aircraft came alive around her. Control surfaces responded to her touch like extensions of her own body. She was no longer Major Evangeline Cortez, the grounded pilot with a disciplinary record. She was Nighthawk 7-7, and she had a target to eliminate. The hangar doors opened onto a runway that stretched into darkness. No tower clearance, no traffic pattern, no observers. Just a single strip of concrete and the vast Pacific night beyond. Vex pushed the throttle forward, and the modified F-16 leaped into the sky with predatory grace. At 15,000 feet, she banked northwest toward the Korean peninsula. Behind her, the lights of Edwards Air Force Base dwindled to pinpricks. Ahead, international waters stretched like a dark ocean dotted with the occasional freighter. And somewhere beyond that, in a facility that officially didn't exist, technicians worked frantically to complete a weapon that could reshape the balance of power in the Pacific. Vex checked her navigation display. 3 hours, 47 minutes to target, time to disappear. She descended to 500 feet above the wave tops, low enough to avoid radar detection but high enough to maintain maneuverability. The F-16's radar-absorbent coating would make her nearly invisible to enemy sensors, but stealth was as much about tactics as technology. She would approach from the south, using a chain of uninhabited islands to mask her approach. The cockpit grew quiet except for the steady hum of electronics and the distant roar of the engine. Vex settled into the rhythm of long-distance flight, her hands light on the controls, her eyes scanning instruments with practiced efficiency. This was what she'd trained for her entire career. This was what she'd been born to do. 2 hours into the flight, she encountered her first test. A Chinese patrol boat appeared on her radar scope, its search radar sweeping methodically across the water. Vex adjusted her course slightly, using the Earth's curvature to stay below the radar horizon. The boat passed beneath her without incident, its crew unaware that a loaded American fighter had just ghosted overhead. The Korean coastline appeared as a dark line against the stars. Vex climbed to 8,000 feet, just high enough to clear the coastal mountains. Her target lay 40 miles inland, hidden in a valley that had been excavated specifically to house the nuclear facility. Intelligence photos showed concrete bunkers, cooling towers, and the distinctive rectangular shape of a uranium enrichment centrifuge building. 30 minutes to target, she whispered to herself, her voice barely audible above the engine noise. The F-16 swept through the night sky like a shadow-given substance. Below, the landscape rolled past in shades of gray and black. Occasional lights marked villages and towns, but the countryside remained largely dark. The facility would be different. Security lighting, guard towers, probably surface-to-air missile sites positioned around the perimeter. Vex's HUD displayed her approach vector. The plan was simple. A single pass at low altitude, release the GBU-28 bunker buster directly over the main centrifuge building, then climb rapidly and head for international waters. The weapon's depleted uranium penetrator would punch through 60 feet of reinforced concrete before detonating. The facility would be completely destroyed, its underground chambers collapsed and sealed. 15 minutes to target. She could see the glow on the horizon now, a subtle brightening that marked the facility's location. Her heart rate increased slightly, but her hands remained steady on the controls. This was what she'd trained for. This was her moment to prove that the Air Force had made a mistake in grounding her. The target appeared on her radar scope as a cluster of geometric shapes in an otherwise empty valley. Vex armed the GBU-28 and began her attack run. The F-16 dove toward the Earth like a bird of prey, its engine noise Dopplering away as it built speed. 5 miles. 4. 3. The facility rushed up to meet her, its buildings clearly visible now in the starlight. Guard towers, vehicle parks, the distinctive cylindrical shape of the main centrifuge building. Vex centered the target in her HUD and prepared to release the weapon. That's when the surface-to-air missiles launched. The SAM sites had been hidden in the surrounding hills, camouflaged to look like natural rock formations. Vex saw the launch flashes a split second before her radar warning receiver began screaming. 2 SA-15 missiles, climbing fast and tracking directly toward her aircraft. "Shit," she breathed, and threw the F-16 into a diving turn that pulled 6 gs. The modified aircraft responded like a living thing, its control surfaces biting into the air with supernatural precision. But the missiles were closing fast, their proximity fuses armed and ready. Vex triggered her chaff dispensers, filling the air behind her with metallic strips designed to confuse radar guidance systems. The first missile bought the deception and detonated harmlessly 200 meters away. The second was smarter, its seeker head locked onto the F-16's heat signature. She pulled the aircraft into a climbing spiral, using the missile's momentum against it. The weapon overshot and lost lock, but by then she was committed to the attack run. The centrifuge building filled her HUD, and she had perhaps 3 seconds to complete the mission. Vex pressed the release button. The GBU-28 separated from the aircraft with a solid thunk, its fins deploying as it fell toward the target. She pulled out of the dive and began climbing rapidly, her engine at maximum power. Behind her, the bunker buster punched through the building's roof and disappeared into the facility's depths. The explosion, when it came, lit up the valley like a miniature sun. The centrifuge building simply vanished, replaced by a mushroom cloud of dust and debris. Secondary explosions rippled through the facility as stored uranium caught fire. The shockwave reached Vex's aircraft a few seconds later, buffeting the F-16 with invisible hands. "Thunder Base, this is Nighthawk 77. Package delivered. RTB in 30 mics." She had said the words without thinking, her training taking over in the aftermath of combat. But as soon as she spoke, she realized her mistake. She was supposed to maintain radio silence. No one was supposed to know she was here. The radio crackled with static. Then, impossibly, a voice responded. "Nighthawk 77, this is Thunder Base. Good hunting, welcome home." Henderson's voice, calm and proud and absolutely unauthorized. Vex smiled for the first time in months. Maybe being grounded hadn't been the end of her career after all. Maybe it had been the beginning of something else entirely. She turned the F-16 toward home, leaving the burning facility behind. Above, the stars wheeled in their ancient patterns, indifferent to human ambition but somehow approving of human courage. Major Evangeline Cortez had struck a blow for freedom, and the world was a safer place because of it. But her story was just beginning. The modified F-16 crossed back into international waters at 4:20 hours, its radar-absorbent coating rendering it nearly invisible to tracking stations along the Korean coast. Vex maintained radio silence, but her mind raced with the implications of what she'd just accomplished. The nuclear facility was gone, its enrichment program set back by years. But more importantly, she had proven something to herself and to the Air Force that had grounded her. She wasn't broken. She wasn't unreliable. She was exactly what the military needed when conventional approaches failed. The return flight passed in a blur of stars and ocean. Vex's hands moved across the controls with unconscious precision, her body operating on muscle memory while her mind processed the night's events. She had violated her grounding, stolen a prototype aircraft, and flown an unauthorized mission into hostile airspace. By any reasonable standard, she should be facing a court-martial. But she had also prevented a nuclear crisis that could have destabilized the entire Pacific region. The question was whether the Air Force would see it that way. Edwards Air Force Base appeared on the horizon as a cluster of lights against the California desert. Vex descended to pattern altitude and entered the traffic pattern, her aircraft's stealth coating beginning to show wear from the night's exertions. The experimental material was designed for a single mission. After that, it would need to be completely reapplied. She touched down on runway 22 at 5:47 hours, the F-16's wheels kissing the concrete with barely a sound. The aircraft rolled to a stop in front of Hangar 7, where Master Sergeant Torres waited with his ground crew. As Vex shut down the engine, She could see Henderson approaching across the tarmac, his expression unreadable. "How did it go?" Torres asked as he helped her out of the cockpit. "Target destroyed. No casualties. Aircraft performed flawlessly." "And the SAMs?" "Evaded barely." Henderson reached them as Vex was pulling off her helmet. The colonel's weathered face showed relief mixed with concern. "Major Cortez, walk with me." They moved away from the aircraft, their footsteps echoing in the pre-dawn silence. Henderson waited until they were out of earshot before speaking. "The Pentagon knows what happened tonight. Satellite imagery confirms the facility was completely destroyed. The Koreans are claiming it was an earthquake, but intelligence estimates their nuclear program has been set back by at least 5 years." "Sir, let me finish." Henderson's voice carried the weight of command. "What you did tonight was technically illegal. You violated your grounding, stole a prototype aircraft, and conducted an unauthorized military operation in foreign airspace. By rights, I should be placing you under arrest." Vex's heart sank. "Yes, sir. But sometimes illegal and wrong aren't the same thing. The Joint Chiefs are calling this the most successful black operation in decades. The president has personally thanked everyone involved." "Everyone involved?" "As far as official records show, tonight's mission was conducted by a pilot whose identity remains classified. The aircraft doesn't exist, the mission never happened, and you were never here." Vex felt a surge of understanding, plausible deniability. "Exactly, but unofficially there are going to be some changes. Your grounding is being lifted, effective immediately. You're being reassigned to a new unit, one that specializes in missions that officially don't exist." "Sorry." Henderson handed her a manila folder. "The 509th Special Operations Squadron. They call themselves the Night Riders. Their mission is to handle situations that conventional forces can't or won't touch. Black operations, deep penetration strikes, missions that require pilots who can think independently and adapt to changing circumstances." Vex opened the folder. Inside was a new assignment order, new security clearances, and a photograph of an aircraft she didn't recognize. It looked like a cross between an F-22 and something from a science fiction movie. "What is it?" she asked. "The F-24 Ghost Rider, 6th-generation stealth fighter, still in development. You'll be one of the first pilots to fly it operationally." The photograph showed an aircraft that seemed to bend light around itself, its surfaces flowing like liquid mercury. It was beautiful and terrifying at the same time, a weapon designed for wars that hadn't been fought yet. "Sir, why me?" Henderson's smile was genuine for the first time since she'd known him. "Because you've proven something tonight, Major. You've proven that sometimes the best pilots are the ones who won't blindly follow orders, the ones who think for themselves, the ones who do what's right instead of what's easy." "And if I refuse?" "Then you go back to flying cargo runs and hauling supplies. But I don't think you'll refuse. I think you found your calling." Vex looked at the photograph again. The F-24 seemed to stare back at her with predatory intelligence. "When do I start?" "Tomorrow. Your new squadron commander is Colonel Sarah Reaper Morrison. She's expecting you at 800 hours." "Sorry." "Yes, Major. Thank you for believing in me when no one else would." Henderson's expression softened. "Major, you never needed anyone to believe in you. You just needed someone to get out of your way and let you fly." They walked back toward the hangar in comfortable silence. Above them, the stars were beginning to fade as dawn approached. The California desert would soon be bathed in golden light, and a new day would begin. But for Vex, it felt like more than just another sunrise. It felt like the beginning of a new life. The 509th Special Operations Squadron was headquartered in a complex of buildings that didn't appear on any official base map. Located in the restricted area between Edwards Air Force Base and the Mojave National Preserve, The facility looked more like a high-tech corporation than a military installation. Glass and steel structures rose from the desert floor like geometric flowers, their surfaces reflecting the morning sun in patterns that seemed to shift and change as Vex approached. She had driven the 30 miles from Edwards in her personal vehicle, a battered Honda Civic that looked distinctly out of place among the military vehicles parked in the visitor lot. The contrast wasn't lost on her. Last night she had been piloting a $20 million prototype aircraft. This morning she was reporting for duty in a car that needed new brake pads. The security checkpoint was staffed by Air Force personnel who looked nothing like typical base guards. They wore subdued uniforms with no unit patches, and their eyes held the particular alertness of people who had seen combat. Vex's new security clearance checked out, and she was directed to Building 7. The lobby was eerily quiet, its polished floors reflecting overhead lights that seemed to emit no warmth. A receptionist with the bearing of a senior NCO directed her to the third floor, where she found Colonel Sarah Morrison waiting in an office that looked more like a corporate boardroom than a military workspace. Morrison was younger than Vex had expected, probably in her early 40s, with graying hair pulled back in a regulation bun and eyes that seemed to catalog everything they saw. She wore a flight suit with patches Vex didn't recognize, and her handshake was firm without being aggressive. "Major Cortez, I've been looking forward to meeting you." "Ma'am, please sit. Coffee." Morrison poured 2 cups from a stainless steel carafe and settled behind her desk. The office walls were covered with photographs of aircraft Vex had never seen before, sleek forms that seemed to exist at the intersection of engineering and art. "I read your after-action report from last night's mission," Morrison said. "Impressive work. The Korean facility was completely destroyed, and you evaded their air defenses without taking a single hit." "Thank you, ma'am. More importantly, you completed the mission despite having no support, no backup, and no official authorization. That's the kind of independent thinking we need in the 509th. Morrison activated a wall display that showed the organizational structure of the squadron. Unlike conventional fighter units, the 509th seemed to operate more like a collection of specialized cells, each designed for specific types of missions. "We handle operations that fall outside normal military channels," Morrison explained. "Black operations, deep penetration strikes, reconnaissance missions in denied airspace. Our pilots are selected for their ability to think independently and adapt to changing circumstances." "And the aircraft?" "State of the art. Most of them are still in development, but we get to fly them operationally while the engineers work out the bugs." Morrison's smile was predatory. "You'll be starting on the F-24 Ghost Rider. It's a challenging aircraft, but I think you're ready for it." Vex studied the organizational chart. The squadron seemed to have fewer than 50 personnel, but their equipment budget must have been enormous. "What about my disciplinary record?" "What about it?" "The incident in the South China Sea, my grounding." Morrison's expression didn't change. "Major in this unit, we're less concerned with whether you follow orders than with whether you accomplish the mission. Sometimes those are the same thing. Sometimes they're not." "I see. Your new call sign is Vex. It suits you." "Ma'am." "Vex, short for vexation. You have a talent for causing problems for people who deserve them." Morrison stood and walked to the window, which offered a view of the flight line. In the distance, Vex could see aircraft that looked like they belonged in a museum of future warfare. Angular shapes that seemed to absorb light, curved surfaces that suggested impossible speeds. "Your first mission briefing is at 1400 hours. Until then, I suggest you get familiar with the Ghost Rider's technical specifications. It's unlike anything you've flown before." "Yes, ma'am." "And Major, welcome to the Night Riders. I think you're going to fit in perfectly." Vex spent the rest of the morning in the squadron's technical library, absorbing everything she could about the F-24 Ghost Rider. The aircraft was a marvel of engineering, incorporating stealth technology decades ahead of anything currently in service. Its twin engines could propel it to speeds approaching Mach 3, while its advanced avionics systems gave it capabilities that bordered on the supernatural. But it was also temperamental, prone to mysterious malfunctions that had killed 2 test pilots during development. The aircraft seemed to demand perfection from its pilots, punishing the slightest error with catastrophic failure. At 1400 hours, Vex reported to the mission briefing room. The space was windowless and climate-controlled, with a large display screen dominating one wall. Her fellow pilots were already seated, and their appearance surprised her. They were older than typical fighter pilots, most in their 30s and 40s. Their faces showed the particular weathering that came from years of flying dangerous missions in hostile airspace. These weren't fresh-faced academy graduates. These were veterans who had seen things that didn't appear in official reports. "Gentlemen, our new pilot," Morrison announced as Vex entered. "Major Evangeline Cortez, call sign Vex." The introductions were brief and formal. Captain Marcus Wraith Thompson, a former F-22 pilot who had transitioned to the 509th after a classified incident over Iran. Major David Phantom Rodriguez, an A-10 pilot who had flown more combat missions than anyone in the room. Captain Jennifer Banshee Liu, a former Navy pilot who had somehow ended up in an Air Force unit that officially didn't exist. "Today's mission," Morrison continued, "is a simple training flight. Vex will be flying her first sortie in the Ghost Rider, with Wraith as her wingman. The objective is to penetrate simulated enemy airspace and strike a target without being detected." The display screen showed a map of the southwestern United States, with enemy positions marked in red. The mission profile looked straightforward, but Vex had learned to be suspicious of anything described as simple. "Rules of engagement?" she asked. "Standard training protocols. No live weapons, but the radar tracking systems are fully operational. If you're detected, you're dead." "And if I'm not detected?" Morrison's smile was enigmatic. "Then you're ready for the real thing." The F-24 Ghost Rider sat in its hangar like a predator waiting to be unleashed. Vex walked around the aircraft slowly, her trained eye cataloging its unusual features. The plane's skin seemed to shimmer with an inner light, and its surfaces flowed seamlessly from one to another without visible joints or seams. "She's beautiful," she said to the crew chief, a master sergeant named Peterson who had been working on experimental aircraft for most of his career. "She's also dangerous," Peterson replied. "The Ghost Rider doesn't forgive mistakes. The flight control system is so advanced it's almost intelligent, but it expects perfection from its pilot." Vex climbed into the cockpit, which looked more like the interior of a spacecraft than a conventional fighter. The displays were entirely digital, showing information in formats she had never seen before. The control stick was different too, responding to the slightest pressure with movements that seemed almost organic. "First time in a Ghost Rider?" Peterson asked as he helped her with the ejection seat harness. "Yes. Remember, the aircraft is reading your biometrics constantly. It knows your heart rate, your stress levels, even your brain activity. If you panic, it will too. And if I stay calm, then you'll experience flight the way it was meant to be." The Ghost Rider's engine started with a sound like singing crystals. Vex felt the aircraft come alive around her, its systems integrating with her own nervous system in ways that felt both natural and alien. The plane seemed to be waiting for her to make a decision, to choose a course of action. She taxied to the runway, where Wraith waited in his own Ghost Rider. The two aircraft looked like twins, but Vex could sense that each had its own personality, its own quirks and preferences. "Vex, you ready for this?" Wraith's voice crackled through the radio. "As ready as I'll ever be." Remember, the Ghost Rider responds to intention as much as control input. Think about where you want to go, and the aircraft will help you get there. Copy that. They took off together, the Ghost Riders climbing into the desert sky with ethereal grace. Vex felt the aircraft's power flowing through her, its consciousness merging with her own. For the first time in months, she felt truly alive. The mission began simply enough. Vex and Wraith flew northeast toward the simulated enemy zone, their aircraft invisible to radar and nearly silent in the air. The Ghost Rider's stealth capabilities were even more advanced than she had imagined, bending electromagnetic radiation around its hull like a stone deflecting water. But as they approached the target area, things began to go wrong. The enemy air defense systems were more sophisticated than the briefing had indicated, using frequency-hopping radars and thermal imaging systems that could detect even the Ghost Rider's minimal signature. "Vex, we've got company," Wraith warned. "4 bandits 12 o'clock high." Vex checked her displays. The enemy aircraft were F-16s, probably flown by Air Force pilots playing the role of adversaries. They were conducting a standard search pattern, but their flight path would take them directly across the route to the target. "Wraith, can we go around?" "Negative. We're already at the edge of our fuel envelope. We have to go through them." Vex felt the Ghost Rider respond to her rising stress levels, its flight control systems becoming more sensitive to her inputs. The aircraft wanted to fight, its weapons systems cycling through targeting algorithms even though no live ordnance was loaded. "Stay calm," she whispered to herself. "The aircraft is reading your biometrics." She dropped to 50 feet above the desert floor, using the terrain to mask her approach. The Ghost Rider's adaptive camouflage system kicked in, its hull reflecting the colors and patterns of the landscape below. From above, the aircraft would be nearly invisible against the rocky terrain. The enemy F-16s passed overhead, their pilots unaware that 2 Ghost Riders were ghosting through their search pattern. Vex held her breath as one of the fighters banked directly toward her position, its radar painting the ground in methodical sweeps. "Vex, you're about to be illuminated," Wraith warned. The F-16's radar beam swept across the Ghost Rider's position, but the stealth aircraft's sophisticated electronic countermeasures created a false return that made it appear to be nothing more than a rocky outcropping. The enemy pilot flew past without detecting the threat below. "Target area in 5 minutes, Vex reported. The simulated enemy installation appeared on her heads-up display as a cluster of buildings surrounded by surface-to-air missile sites. The mission called for a precision strike on the main facility, but the SAM coverage made a traditional attack approach impossible. "Wraith, I'm going to try something." "Vex, stick to the mission profile." But Vex was already committing to a maneuver that would have been impossible in a conventional aircraft. She pulled the Ghost Rider into a vertical climb, using its advanced thrust vectoring to ascend like a rocket. At 30,000 feet, she rolled inverted and began a power dive toward the target. The Ghost Rider's airframe groaned under the stress, but its exotic materials held together. Vex felt the aircraft's artificial intelligence working frantically to maintain control as they approached the speed of sound in a near-vertical dive. "Vex, what are you doing?" "Proving a point." She leveled out at 500 feet, the target rushing toward her at nearly 700 miles per hour. The simulated weapon release was perfect, the computer-generated bomb impacting exactly where it was supposed to. But more importantly, the SAM sights never got a lock on her aircraft. "Target destroyed," she reported. "RTB." "Vex, that was insane." "That was necessary." They flew back to base in silence, the Ghost Riders cutting through the desert air like silver arrows. Vex felt the aircraft's systems gradually returning to normal, its artificial intelligence filing away the lessons learned from the mission. Back at the squadron, Morrison was waiting in the debriefing room. The colonel's expression was unreadable as she reviewed the mission data. Interesting approach, Major. The dive attack wasn't in the mission profile. No, ma'am, but it worked. It worked because the Ghost Rider can handle stresses that would tear apart a conventional aircraft. In a real F-16, that maneuver would have killed you. But I wasn't in a real F-16, ma'am. I was in a Ghost Rider. Morrison's smile was barely visible. Exactly. You adapted to the aircraft's capabilities instead of being limited by conventional tactics. That's what we need in the 509th. Ma'am, you're cleared for operational missions, Major. Congratulations. Vex felt a surge of pride, but also apprehension. Operational missions in the 509th meant flying into situations that couldn't be handled by conventional forces. It meant risking her life in aircraft that barely existed, on missions that officially never happened. When do I start? Tomorrow. There's a situation developing in the South China Sea, something that requires our particular expertise. The South China Sea. The same waters where Vex had refused to fire on civilian targets 3 years ago. The same incident that had led to her grounding and disciplinary action. Now she was being sent back, but this time as part of a unit that specialized in the impossible. Ma'am, about my previous experience in that area. Major, that's exactly why you're perfect for this mission. You know the area, you know the threats, and you've proven you can make difficult decisions under pressure. Morrison stood and walked to the window. Outside, the desert was bathed in the golden light of late afternoon. The mission briefing is at 600 tomorrow. I suggest you get some rest. You're going to need it. That night, Vex lay in her quarters staring at the ceiling. The events of the past 48 hours felt surreal. She had gone from grounded transport pilot to operational member of the Air Force's most secret squadron. She had flown aircraft that pushed the boundaries of physics and completed missions that would remain classified for decades. But she couldn't shake the feeling that she was being prepared for something bigger. The 509th didn't recruit pilots just to fly training missions. They were building towards something, preparing for a conflict that conventional forces couldn't handle. Her phone buzzed with a text message from an unknown number. "Proud of you, keep flying. H. Henderson." Somehow, her former commander was keeping track of her progress. The message was brief and cryptic, but it carried a weight of meaning that made her smile. She fell asleep thinking about the Ghost Rider, about the way it had responded to her thoughts and intentions. The aircraft was more than a machine. It was a partner, a symbiotic relationship between human intuition and artificial intelligence. Tomorrow, she would take that partnership into combat. The mission briefing at 600 hours was unlike anything Vex had experienced in her conventional Air Force career. The room was filled with personnel from multiple agencies, Air Force, Navy, CIA, and organizations she didn't recognize. The mission was being coordinated at the highest levels of government. "Gentlemen, ladies," Morrison began, "what I'm about to tell you is classified at the highest levels. 3 days ago, a Chinese submarine launched an experimental hypersonic missile from the South China Sea. The missile was carrying a nuclear warhead." The room fell silent. Vex felt her blood run cold. The missile malfunctioned and crashed into the sea approximately 200 miles southeast of Taiwan. The warhead did not detonate, but it remains intact on the ocean floor. The Chinese are conducting a massive salvage operation to recover it. Morrison activated the wall display, showing satellite imagery of the crash site. Dozens of Chinese vessels surrounded the area, their sonar systems probing the depths for the lost weapon. "Our mission is to retrieve the warhead before the Chinese can recover it. The operation will be conducted by Navy SEALs using a deep-sea submersible. The 509th's role is to provide air cover and strike capability if the mission is compromised." Captain Thompson raised his hand. "Ma'am, what's the threat level?" "Extreme. The Chinese have deployed their most advanced air defense systems to protect the salvage operation. We're looking at J-20 fighters, Type 55 destroyers, and a nuclear attack submarine. If shooting starts, it will escalate quickly. Vex studied the satellite images. The Chinese formation was impressive, but she could see gaps in their coverage. Ma'am, what about stealth approach? The Ghost Riders will be operating at the edge of their range. You'll have maybe 30 minutes over the target area before you need to head home. And if the SEALs need extraction? Morrison's expression darkened. Then you'll have to buy them time, whatever the cost. The mission launched at 200 hours under a moonless sky. 4 Ghost Riders took off from the squadron's secret base, their stealth coatings rendering them invisible to radar. Vex flew as wingman to Thompson, with Rodriguez and Liu forming the second element. The flight to the South China Sea passed in tense silence. The Ghost Riders cruised at 40,000 feet, their advanced engines sipping fuel with miserly efficiency. Below, the Pacific stretched endlessly, its dark surface broken only by the occasional merchant vessel. "Vex, how you feeling?" Thompson asked as they approached the target area. "Ready for anything." "Good, because we're about to find out what these aircraft can really do." The Chinese salvage operation appeared on their displays as a cluster of contacts centered around the crash site. The formation was even more impressive than the satellite photos had suggested: destroyers, frigates, support vessels, and somewhere beneath the waves, the nuclear submarine that had launched the original missile. "Seahawk 1, this is Wraith 1, Thompson radioed to the SEAL team. "We're in position." "Wraith 1, Seahawk 1, beginning descent now, estimate 30 minutes to target depth." Vex watched the Chinese vessels through her aircraft's sophisticated sensors. Their radar systems were active, sweeping the sky in overlapping patterns. But the Ghost Riders remained invisible, their stealth technology rendering them effectively transparent to enemy detection. "Multiple contacts bearing 270, Rodriguez reported. J-20s climbing to intercept." The Chinese stealth fighters appeared on Vex's display as ghostly contacts at the edge of radar range. They were flying a standard combat air patrol, but their flight path would take them dangerously close to the SEAL insertion point. "Wraith 1, this is Seahawk 1. We're taking fire. Repeat, we're taking fire." The radio crackled with the sound of automatic weapons and explosions. The SEALs had encountered resistance from Chinese naval personnel already on the wreck site. "Seahawk 1, can you complete the mission?" "Negative, Wraith 1. We need immediate extraction." Thompson's voice was calm despite the crisis. "Phantom, Banshee, you're with me. We're going to make some noise to draw attention away from the extraction point. Vex, you cover the SEALs." "Copy that." The Ghost Riders split formation, 3 aircraft heading toward the Chinese fleet while Vex descended toward the crash site. Her aircraft's sensors painted a picture of chaos below: SEAL divers fighting Chinese naval personnel in the wreckage of the sunken missile. "Seahawk 1, this is Vex. I'm overhead. What do you need?" "Vex, we need you to engage the Chinese patrol boat at grid reference 340-1567. They're dropping depth charges on our position." Vex checked her weapons display. The Ghost Rider was armed with advanced air-to-surface missiles, but engaging the Chinese vessel would mean starting a war. "Seahawk 1, I'm not authorized to engage Chinese forces." "Vex, they're about to kill us all, please." The patrol boat's sonar signature bloomed on her display as it prepared to drop another pattern of depth charges. The SEAL team was trapped below, unable to surface without being detected. Vex made a decision that would define the rest of her career. She armed her missiles and locked onto the Chinese vessel. "Seahawk 1, take cover, Fox 3. The missile streaked from the Ghost Rider's internal bay, its warhead designed to disable rather than destroy. The Chinese patrol boat's weapons systems went offline, its crew scrambling to restore power. Vex, this is Wraith 1. What's your status? Engagement complete. Seals are clear. Good, because we've got problems up here. The Chinese J-20s had detected the missile launch and were converging on Vex's position. Their stealth technology was impressive, but the Ghost Rider's sensors could track them through their heat signatures and electromagnetic emissions. Vex, you've got 4 bandits inbound. Recommend immediate evasion. But Vex was already moving, the Ghost Rider responding to her thoughts as much as her control inputs. The aircraft dove toward the ocean surface, its adaptive camouflage system making it nearly invisible against the dark water. The J-20s flashed overhead, their pilots searching for a target that had seemingly vanished. Vex held her breath as one of the fighters banked directly toward her position, its radar painting the water in methodical sweeps. Wraith 1, I'm being painted. Vex, maintain stealth, do not engage. The J-20's radar beam swept across the Ghost Rider's position, but the stealth aircraft's electronic countermeasures created a false return that made it appear to be nothing more than a wave crest. The enemy pilot flew past without detecting the threat below. Seahawk 1, this is Vex. What's your extraction status? Vex, we've got the package. Moving to extraction point now. The SEALs had recovered the nuclear warhead, but they were still trapped beneath the Chinese fleet. Vex watched as enemy sonar operators tried to track the American divers through the wreckage. Wraith 1, this is Vex. I'm going to create a distraction. Vex, negative. Maintain position. But Vex was already committed to action. She pulled the Ghost Rider into a climbing turn, its engines creating a distinctive acoustic signature that would be impossible to miss. The Chinese sonar operators immediately locked onto the sound, their attention drawn away from the escaping SEALs. Vex, what are you doing? Buying time. The J-20s converged on her position like hungry sharks. Vex felt the Ghost Rider's artificial intelligence working frantically to maintain stealth, but the aircraft's systems were being pushed beyond their design limits. Multiple locks, her threat warning system announced. The Chinese fighters had acquired her position and were preparing to fire. Vex pulled the Ghost Rider into a series of evasive maneuvers that would have been impossible in a conventional aircraft, using the plane's advanced thrust vectoring to change direction with impossible speed. Seahawk 1, this is Vex. Are you clear? Vex, we're at the extraction point. Navy Helo is inbound. Copy that, stay safe. The J-20s fired, their missiles streaking toward the Ghost Rider with deadly precision. Vex triggered her countermeasures, filling the air with chaff and flares, while the aircraft's electronic warfare systems tried to jam the incoming weapons. 2 missiles lost lock and detonated harmlessly. The third was smarter, its seeker head adapting to the Ghost Rider's countermeasures. Vex felt the aircraft's systems warning her of imminent impact. Vex, you're notched. Get out of there. She pulled the Ghost Rider into a power dive, using the aircraft's superior speed to outrun the missile. The weapon overshot and self-destructed, but by then the Chinese fighters were converging on her position for a gun attack. Wraith 1, this is Vex. I'm going to need some help here. Vex, we're inbound, hold on. The other Ghost Riders appeared on her display, their stealth coatings flickering as they prepared to engage. The J-20s suddenly found themselves outnumbered and outgunned by aircraft they couldn't see coming. Fox 2, Thompson called as he engaged the lead J-20. The Chinese fighter exploded in a ball of fire, its pilot ejecting just before impact. The remaining J-20s scattered, their formation broken by the sudden attack. All aircraft, this is Wraith 1. Mission complete, RTB immediately. The Ghost Riders formed up and headed east toward international waters, their mission accomplished but their cover blown. The Chinese would know that American stealth fighters had been operating in their territorial waters, but they wouldn't be able to prove it. "Vex, nice work back there," Thompson said as they climbed to cruise altitude. "Just doing my job." "No, you did more than that. You saved those SEALs and prevented a nuclear incident. The brass is going to be very happy." Vex looked back toward the Chinese fleet, now just a cluster of lights on the horizon. Somewhere below, the nuclear warhead was safely in American hands, its secrets soon to be analyzed by intelligence experts. But she knew this was just the beginning. The 509th Squadron was being prepared for something bigger, something that would require all their skills and more. The world was changing, and pilots like her were going to be the ones who shaped that change. "Wraith 1, this is Vex. Request permission to take point." "Vex, you've got the lead." She pushed the Ghost Rider to the front of the formation, its advanced sensors probing the darkness ahead. Behind her, the other pilots followed in perfect formation, their aircraft invisible to radar and nearly silent in the night air. They were the Night Riders, and they were heading home. The debriefing at 800 hours was attended by personnel Vex had never seen before. Men and women in expensive suits who spoke in code words and classified acronyms. The mission had been successful, but its implications were far-reaching. "The warhead has been secured," Morrison announced. "Analysis is ongoing, but preliminary reports suggest the Chinese have made significant advances in hypersonic delivery systems." A woman in a Navy uniform leaned forward. "What about the engagement with the J-20s?" Officially, there was no engagement. The Chinese pilots reported mechanical failures that caused them to crash. No survivors. Vex felt a chill. The Chinese pilot had ejected successfully, but somehow his parachute had failed to deploy. The official report would claim equipment malfunction, but everyone in the room knew the truth. "Major Cortez," one of the suits said, "your decision to engage the patrol boat was not authorized." "Sir, American personnel were in immediate danger. I made a tactical decision based on the situation." A decision that could have started a war. Morrison intervened. The Major's actions were within the bounds of reasonable military judgment. The mission was successful, and no American lives were lost. The suit nodded slowly. "Very well, but in the future, engagement parameters will be more strictly defined." After the formal debriefing, Morrison asked Vex to remain behind. The colonel waited until the room was empty before speaking. "You did well out there, Major, but you're walking a fine line. The people we work for don't like improvisation." "Ma'am, with respect, improvisation is what saved those SEALs." "I know, but the next time you decide to go off script, make sure you can justify it to a congressional committee." Vex felt the weight of responsibility settling on her shoulders. Flying for the 509th wasn't just about piloting advanced aircraft. It was about making life-and-death decisions in situations that didn't exist in any training manual. "Ma'am, what's our next mission?" Morrison's smile was enigmatic. "That depends on what the intelligence analysts find in that warhead, but I suspect we'll be busy very soon." That afternoon, Vex found herself in the squadron's technical library, studying reports on Chinese military capabilities. The J-20 fighters they had encountered were more advanced than public intelligence suggested. Their stealth technology was approaching parity with American systems. Interesting reading. She looked up to find Captain Liu settling into the chair across from her. The former Navy pilot looked tired, her eyes showing the strain of the morning's mission. "The Chinese are getting better," Vex said. "Their pilots, their aircraft, their tactics. We can't count on technological superiority forever." "No, we can't. That's why units like the 509th exist. We're not just pilots anymore. We're specialists in impossible situations." "Is that what you signed up for when you joined the Navy?" Liu laughed bitterly. "I signed up to fly F-18s off aircraft carriers. Instead, I ended up flying experimental aircraft on missions that don't exist for an Air Force unit that isn't supposed to be here. Any regrets? Every day. But then I remember what we're fighting for. The world is getting more dangerous and someone has to stand watch. Might as well be us. Vex closed the intelligence report and leaned back in her chair. What do you think is coming next? Something bigger than the South China Sea. The Chinese have been pushing boundaries for months, testing our responses. That missile launch wasn't an accident. It was a message. What kind of message? That they're not afraid of us anymore. That they think they can match our capabilities aircraft for aircraft, pilot for pilot. And can they? Liu's expression was grim. We're about to find out. That evening, Vex stood on the observation deck of the squadron headquarters, watching the sun set over the desert. The Ghost Riders sat in their hangars like sleeping predators, their stealth coatings shimmering in the golden light. Her phone buzzed with another message from Henderson. Heard about your South China Sea adventure. Well done. The real test is coming. She typed back, what real test? The response came immediately. The one that will determine whether humanity survives the next decade. Vex stared at the cryptic message, trying to decode its meaning. But before she could respond, the base's emergency klaxons began wailing. Red lights flashed across the facility, and her pager erupted with an urgent message. All pilots report to briefing room immediately. Priority 1. She ran through the corridors of the headquarters building, her mind racing through possibilities. Priority 1 meant imminent threat to national security. It meant the kind of crisis that could escalate into global war within hours. The briefing room was chaos. Pilots, intelligence officers, and command personnel crowded around multiple display screens showing real-time satellite imagery. Morrison stood at the front of the room, her face grave. Ladies and gentlemen, we have a situation. 20 minutes ago, North Korea launched a ballistic missile toward Japan. The missile was intercepted by Japanese defense systems, but the warhead contained something unexpected. The display showed footage of the missile's destruction, but instead of the usual explosion, there was a strange green glow that seemed to pulse with unnatural light. The warhead was carrying an experimental electromagnetic pulse device. When it detonated, it created a localized blackout affecting 3 prefectures in northern Japan. Power grids, communication systems, even hardened military installations went dark. Thompson raised his hand. Ma'am, what's the threat assessment? Intelligence suggests the North Koreans have developed a new type of EMP weapon, one that's significantly more powerful than anything we've seen before. If they can deploy it on a larger scale, they could cripple the electrical infrastructure of entire nations. Rodriguez leaned forward. What's our mission? Morrison's expression hardened. We're going to North Korea to destroy their EMP research facility. Tonight. The room fell silent. A strike on North Korea would be an act of war, one that could trigger a nuclear exchange that would devastate the Pacific region. Ma'am, Vex said carefully, has this been authorized at the highest levels? The president is being briefed now, but the facility is mobile, and our window of opportunity is closing rapidly. We need to be airborne within the hour. And if we're caught, then we were never there. The Ghost Riders don't exist, the 509th doesn't exist, and you were never born. The pilots exchanged glances. They had signed up for dangerous missions, but this was beyond anything they had imagined. A direct strike on North Korea could trigger World War III. Ma'am, Thompson said, what about the other nuclear powers, Russia, China? They're being informed through diplomatic channels. But if this EMP technology proliferates, it could destabilize the entire international system. Morrison activated a new display showing the North Korean facility. It was located in a mountainous region near the Chinese border, protected by multiple layers of air defense systems. The facility is heavily defended, but our intelligence suggests it's also highly unstable. The EMP devices use an exotic matter that becomes increasingly dangerous as it's refined. One well-placed strike could trigger a chain reaction that would destroy the entire complex. And the civilian population? Liu asked. The facility is in an isolated area. Casualties should be minimal. Vex studied the mission profile. 4 Ghost Riders would penetrate North Korean airspace, strike the facility, and return to base before their absence was noticed. Simple in concept, but extraordinarily dangerous in execution. Ma'am, what about Chinese air defenses? The facility is right on their border. You'll be flying below their radar horizon, but if you're detected, you'll be on your own. Understood. Morrison looked around the room, her eyes meeting each pilot's gaze. I won't lie to you. This is the most dangerous mission any of us has ever flown. The aircraft are untested in combat, the enemy defenses are formidable, and the political implications are staggering. But if we don't stop this technology now, we may not get another chance. The North Koreans are planning to sell their EMP weapons to terrorist organizations and rogue states. We can't allow that to happen. Vex felt the familiar surge of adrenaline that came before a dangerous mission. The Ghost Rider was waiting in its hangar, its systems primed for combat. This was what she had trained for, what she had been born to do. When do we launch? She asked. Wheels up in 45 minutes. Good luck, everyone, and remember, officially this mission never happened. The Ghost Riders took off under a starless sky, their stealth coatings rendering them invisible to radar and nearly silent in the air. Vex flew in the number 2 position, her aircraft's sensors probing the darkness ahead for threats. The flight to North Korea passed in tense silence. The Ghost Riders cruised at 50,000 feet, their advanced engines leaving no contrails in the thin air. Below, the Pacific stretched endlessly, its dark surface broken only by the occasional fishing vessel. Vex, how are you feeling? Thompson asked as they approached North Korean airspace. Ready for anything. Good, because we're about to find out what happens when the impossible meets the inevitable. The North Korean coastline appeared on their displays as a dark line against the stars. The country's electrical grid was minimal, creating vast areas of darkness that would help mask their approach. All aircraft, this is Wraith 1. We're entering enemy airspace. Radio silence from this point forward. The Ghost Riders descended to 500 feet above the mountainous terrain, their adaptive camouflage systems making them nearly invisible against the rocky landscape. North Korean radar stations swept the sky overhead, but the stealth aircraft remained undetected. 20 minutes into enemy airspace, they encountered their first challenge. A formation of MiG-29 fighters was conducting a training exercise directly across their route to the target. Vex watched the enemy aircraft through her sensors, calculating their flight path and timing. The MiGs were flying a standard intercept pattern, but their route would take them dangerously close to the Ghost Rider's position. Thompson made a hand signal, and the formation split into 2 elements. Vex and Liu would continue toward the target, while Thompson and Rodriguez created a distraction to draw the MiGs away. The target facility appeared on Vex's display as a cluster of buildings hidden in a mountain valley. The structure was larger than the intelligence photos had suggested, with multiple underground levels and sophisticated air defense systems. Vex, I'm getting strange readings from the facility, Liu reported over the tactical frequency. What kind of readings? Electromagnetic anomalies. Whatever they're doing in there, it's affecting our sensors. Vex checked her own displays. The facility was emitting energy signatures unlike anything she had seen before. The EMP research was apparently more advanced than intelligence had indicated. Liu, are you ready for the attack run? Ready when you are. They began their approach to the target, the Ghost Riders diving toward the facility with predatory grace. The buildings rushed up to meet them, their rooftops clearly visible in the starlight. That's when the facility's defenses activated. The surface-to-air missiles launched from hidden positions throughout the valley, their rocket motors creating brilliant streaks of light against the darkness. But these weren't conventional SAMs. They were guided by the facility's experimental electromagnetic systems, making them nearly impossible to evade. "Vex, we've got problems," Liu warned. The missiles were tracking the Ghost Riders despite their stealth coatings, their guidance systems apparently immune to electronic countermeasures. Vex threw her aircraft into a series of evasive maneuvers, but the weapons continued to close on her position. "Liu, take the shot. I'll handle the SAMs." "Vex, you can't handle all of them alone." "Watch me." Vex pushed the Ghost Rider to its limits, using the aircraft's advanced thrust vectoring to change direction with impossible speed. The missiles overshot and exploded harmlessly, but more were launching from positions throughout the valley. Liu's aircraft dove toward the main facility, its bomb bay doors opening to reveal a single GBU-57 massive ordnance penetrator. The weapon was designed to destroy the deepest underground bunkers, and its 30,000-pound warhead would obliterate the EMP research facility. "Vex, missile lock," Liu's threat warning system announced. A SAM was tracking directly toward Liu's aircraft, its proximity fuse armed and ready. Vex made a split-second decision that would haunt her for the rest of her career. She interposed her own aircraft between the missile and Liu's Ghost Rider. The SAM detonated against the Ghost Rider's fuselage, its explosive warhead tearing through the aircraft's exotic materials. Warning lights flashed across Vex's cockpit as systems failed throughout the aircraft. "Vex, you're hit," Liu reported. "I'm okay, take the shot." Liu released the GBU-57, and the massive weapon fell toward the facility like a meteorite. The bomb punched through the building's roof and disappeared into the underground chambers where the EMP research was being conducted. The explosion, when it came, was unlike anything either pilot had ever seen. Instead of a conventional blast, there was a pulse of electromagnetic energy that lit up the entire valley. The facility simply vanished, replaced by a crater that glowed with an eerie green light. "Target destroyed," Liu reported. "Vex, what's your status?" Vex checked her instruments. The Ghost Rider was badly damaged, its stealth coating compromised and its engines running rough. But the aircraft was still airworthy, and she had enough fuel to reach international waters. "I'm good to go, let's get out of here." They climbed rapidly away from the target area, their mission complete but their aircraft damaged. Behind them, the North Korean facility burned with an unnatural fire that would continue for days. "Wraith 1, this is Vex. Package delivered, RTB immediately." "Vex, good work. What's your damage assessment?" "Stealth is compromised, but I can make it home." "Copy that, stay with Liu. We're all going home together." The flight back to base was a nightmare of mechanical problems and near misses with enemy aircraft. Vex's Ghost Rider was barely holding together, its advanced systems failing one by one as they crossed the Pacific. But she kept flying, her determination and skill keeping the damaged aircraft aloft. This was what she had trained for, what she had been born to do. She was a pilot, and pilots brought their aircraft home no matter what. They landed at the squadron base just as the sun was rising over the California desert. Vex's Ghost Rider rolled to a stop on the runway, its engines finally giving out after hours of abuse. "Vex, you okay?" Thompson asked as the ground crew helped her out of the cockpit. "I'm fine, how did we do?" "Mission accomplished. The EMP facility is gone, and the North Koreans have lost years of research." "And the political fallout?" Thompson's smile was grim. "What political fallout? Officially, this mission never happened. Vex looked back at her damaged aircraft. The Ghost Rider would never fly again, its exotic materials too damaged to repair. But the mission had been successful, and that was what mattered. "Ma'am," she said to Morrison, who was approaching across the tarmac, "mission complete." "Well done, Major, all of you." "What's next?" Morrison's expression was unreadable. "That depends on what the intelligence analysts find in the facility's wreckage, but I suspect we'll be busy very soon." Vex nodded, feeling the weight of responsibility settling on her shoulders once again. The 509th Squadron was fighting a shadow war, engaging threats that couldn't be handled by conventional forces. It was dangerous work, but someone had to do it. And she was beginning to realize that she was exactly where she was supposed to be. The debriefing lasted 18 hours. Intelligence analysts dissected every second of the mission, looking for clues about North Korean capabilities and intentions. The destruction of the EMP facility had been complete, but the implications of the technology they had found were staggering. The exotic matter they were using, Dr. Patricia Wells from the Defense Intelligence Agency explained, "It's unlike anything we've seen before. Our preliminary analysis suggests it's some form of artificially created dark matter." Vex leaned forward in her chair. "Dark matter? I thought that was theoretical." It was, but the North Koreans have apparently found a way to synthesize it in small quantities. When it's destabilized, it creates electromagnetic pulses that are orders of magnitude more powerful than conventional EMP weapons. Morrison frowned. Where did they get this technology? The North Koreans don't have the industrial base to develop something like this independently. That's what we're trying to determine. The facility was completely destroyed, but we're analyzing debris and radiation signatures. So far, the evidence suggests outside assistance. What kind of outside assistance? Wells hesitated. We're not sure, but the technology appears to be more advanced than anything currently in development by any known nation. The room fell silent. The implications were clear but unspoken. If the North Koreans had received help from an unknown source, it meant there were technological capabilities in the world that intelligence agencies didn't know about. "What about the Chinese?" Thompson asked. "They have the industrial base and the scientific expertise." "Negative. We've confirmed that Chinese leadership was as surprised by the EMP weapon as we were. They're actually grateful that we eliminated the facility. It was destabilizing their border region." Vex studied the technical diagrams on the display screen. The exotic matter weapon was elegant in its simplicity, but the physics behind it were almost incomprehensible. "Dr. Wells, how long would it take to recreate this technology?" "With the right resources and expertise, maybe 5 to 10 years, but that's assuming we can figure